thanks very much for coming along. Really, really appreciate it. There's been some questions on the board that hopefully you've been mulling over while you're waiting for me to start. And those questions, the answers to those questions will appear as I go through my presentation. So essentially you've got three main sections. Section 1, I'm going to look at introduce surveillance capitalism and tell you about imperatives 1 and 2. Section 2, the ill effects of social media on the young. 3, I'm going to come back to surveillance capitalism, imperatives 3 and 4. I'm going to finish with 2 visions and try and leave as much time as possible for Q&A. I do have quite a lot to cover. I'll have to just show you this book. So this book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, I read this over the summer. It's an absolutely amazing book, and a lot of my presentation is based on it. But it's also based on quite a bit of research that I've been reading prior to the summer holiday. So, the digital iron cage. Let's get started. So I thought I'd start with a question I get asked a lot at the start of an A-level business course, which is, sir, how do companies like Facebook make money when it's free? Which is a great question. And as it happens, Mark Zuckerberg was asked this very question when he was giving evidence to the Senate following the Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2018. And so you can hear his answer rather than mine. Here we go.
Well, if so, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
I see. That's great.
Hey, NBC News.
Okay, so that was Mark Zuckerberg's answer. And that's, and that's the answer that I normally give students when they ask that question. Something along the lines, this is the consensus question. How do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service? Oh, we run ads. But that's not a very truthful answer. And it's not the answer that I'll be giving to students having read this book. So a better answer, slightly longer answer, is something like this. Senator, being free is the business model. It's this model that allows us to collect as much data as possible. We then use this data to optimize our ability to sell ads or products to businesses such as ads. This is the model, Senator, not the way around that you've phrased the question. But of course he didn't say that. So this is imperative number 1 of surveillance capitalism, which is data extraction. And a good way to understand it is to go back to the early years of Google. So Google in its early foundation years was analysing data to improve its search results. The more accurate, relevant the results, the more searches you would get, therefore the more accurate your results would be, the more searches. So you have a virtuous loop. And Shoshana Zuboff has it in this cycle here. Users, their rendered behaviour, search engine learning, improve search results, and back we go. So far, so kind of understandable. But here we have what she calls data exhaust. And data exhaust was, or data surplus, or behaviour surplus, was information that wasn't needed to improve the accuracy of the search results. It was all this type of stuff. Location, how you phrase the query, dwell times, how long people spent on the web pages, click patterns, how they moved the cursor around on web pages. All of this data exhaust was being stored, but they weren't using it because it wasn't improving the search results. However, then came the year 2000, the dot-com crash. Now, I don't know how familiar students in the room are with this. I was working in finance in 2001, so I was pretty familiar with it because we saw a huge slump in tech stocks on the NASDAQ. You can see here, 2000 the peak. Many dot-com companies, they were completely revalued, they failed, and Google suddenly now is under huge pressure to show how you're going to be profitable. And their answer was to turn to advertising. This is despite stating that they wouldn't do that, they would remain in the academic realm. Anyway, they did. And when they did this, they did 2 quite extraordinary things. So the first thing is they said to advertisers, don't you worry about the keywords. We will tell you what the keywords are, because we know. And secondly, rather than focusing your advertising on the keywords, because of all the data that we have, all the information that we have in our data surplus, we will target the individuals, and that will ensure relevance to users and value to advertisers. Now that may seem very matter of fact now, but at the time it was utterly revolutionary. Completely changed the game. And it led to this depiction of Professor Zuboff is this, where All of the data is being used in what she calls a new means of production. It creates prediction products about what we are going to do, likely to do next. These are sold in markets and future behavior, generating huge surveillance revenues which come back in like this. This is the primary model, and this is secondary. So this is a phrase I often have used with students as well, which is if you're not paying for the product, but you're using the product, you are the product. But I'm going to use a modified version from now on that I've got from this book, which is that if you're not paying for it, but you're using it, you're the raw material that's being used to create the product that's being sold. And the more raw material that Google, Meta, Amazon, etc. can collect, the greater the range and sophistication of the products that they can sell to businesses, which is their business model. Also, data feeds AI. So to give two quick examples, in 2017, Facebook had 350 million photos updated daily. And they used these photos to massively improve their facial recognition software and became one of the market leaders for it. They dropped this facial rec in 2021, although some analysts are saying they've dropped it for now because of privacy concerns. But anyway, for now they have dropped it. But it illustrates how data powers and fuels AI. Another example I've got here, a completely different one, is Sleep Number. They make a smart bed. You can buy a smart bed now. It monitors your breathing patterns and so on. And they said that they collect more than 8 billion biometric points every night. They gather them every second, and they're sent by an app. And their CEO said, this gives us the intelligence to be able to continue to feed our algorithms. I think this is a great summary of the situation. With machine intelligence, there's no tension between quantity and quality. It reaches its full potential for quality only as it approximates totality. Professor Sabuth. Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO in 2014, Microsoft was in some trouble when he was appointed. The key reason why, probably, is, you could argue, is because they weren't really following this new type of capitalism. And he says here, the opportunity to have this new world is to find a way of catalyzing this data to exhaust, his words, from ubiquitous computing and converting it into fuel for ambient intelligence. Data that was once untapped is now an asset. So we have an entirely new economy. It's entirely new. That's imperative 1. It also runs on imperative 2, which is economies of scope. So as well as needing huge quantities of data, you want data from a range of sources. Because if you can combine data from more than one source, it's more powerful. You can use it to create better products, and you can use it to predict. So again, at first the raw materials of rendered human experience were found by accident, a byproduct of search. But now they are hunted aggressively. Just to give an online example, a virtual example, G Suite, email, as we know, Google scans your emails, Drive, all the documents there, your calendar, Hangouts, your location. When you combine all of that information together, then you're getting a really good picture of what's happening, and therefore your power and your profitability increases. Another aspect of economies of scope is third-party apps. So a third-party app is a software application made by someone other than the manufacturer of the mobile device or the operating system. So there was an investigation by the Wall Street Journal, and they found that many apps, and they were particularly interested in those that had intimate data, health apps, apps with menstrual cycle information that people were inputting, they were sharing data with tech giants such as Facebook. Another example of this third-party situation is in 2015, if you visited the top 100 most popular websites, you'd collect over 6,000 cookies on your computer. So basically 60 cookies per visit. And these cookies, 83% of them, were from third-party websites unrelated to the actual website that you were visiting. So it's all about collecting as much data from as many sources as possible. And so another way to collect data, to broaden the scope of your data, is to connect everything to the internet. Physical objects, the Internet of Things. So I still do teach about this, but I teach about it in a business sense, there's money to be made here, this is going to be good. But now I'm very, very troubled by it. So that's the Nest thermostat, bought by Google some years ago now. And it does a lot more than turn your boiler on and off, control the temperature in your home. It has motion sensors, so it can learn the behaviour of how people are acting in their home. It gathers information from other connected apps, the fitness trackers, your car, if your oven happens to be connected to the internet, which some ovens are now, and so on. A study by Queen Mary University found that if you entered the Nest ecosystem of connected apps and devices, you would need to review nearly 1,000 so-called contracts. So I want to state at this point, I really love Google. Like, I love it. I love Google products. I use Google Maps to death over the summer. Google is amazing. But Google is one company within a new system that is deeply concerning to me, and deeply concerning to an increasing number of people. Here's a good quote from Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. In business, I look for economic castles protected by unbreachable moats. So when he's looking to invest, that's what he looks for. So before I get to a particular castle, these are the top 10 companies on this particular date. I did this during the summer, most of it. So obviously market cap changes all the time, depending on the share price, number of shares. But the answer is 6. So this goes back to that first one. So there's 6 of these are tech giants: Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, Nvidia, and Meta on that particular day. 2 things about this. First of all, those companies, 30 years ago, the majority of those companies didn't exist. But also 30 years ago, this industry didn't exist. This is a completely new industry, as revolutionary as, I don't know, like the motor car, and all the other things you can possibly think of that happened in the 20th century. This is the new industry, but we don't really understand it. This is Castle Google. Well, I don't understand it. I'm trying. Castle Google, 271 different products, 240 companies bought, 3.5 billion searches a day, 92% market share, 100 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute, 75% market share for Android, so on and so on and so on. It's also a hugely powerful lobbyist, hugely powerful in the States and in Europe, and it provides funds to universities and research projects. And there's quite a lot of troubling information in that book about that aspect of Google. But that is Castle Google. It's probably the most powerful castle ever built as a company. The most powerful company that's ever existed, you could argue. And it looks kind of like that. It's one player in what Zuboff calls the rendition of behavioural data from the physical world. So we've got wearables, Fitbit actually is owned by Google, but anyway. Rendition of faces, doorbell cameras and so on. Rendition of speech, helping with recognising speech, AI and so on. Robot vacuum cleaners. So Amazon just bought iRobot, which owns Roomba, which was mapping floor plans and selling them to estate agents, as well as picking up conversations in the house. Car monitoring systems that can check how you're driving, listen to conversations, smart beds, aforementioned smart beds, and so on and so on. So, I could actually, right now, be videoing you lot. I could be. And I could stream it to Amazon's artificial intelligence products, live. And they could give me a mathematical plot and single image summary to help me estimate these factors. So I could, for example, tell you that Mrs. Drummondshire is paying attention, and Mr. Bean is feeling slightly anxious, which is surprising. And Mr. Woodward, I'll tell you later. This tech is here. It's available. It's now, and it's all about getting data. Smart TVs. So Samsung Smart TV in 2015, it was recording everything said more or less within the vicinity of the TV. So there could be anything from we've run out of milk to, I'm pregnant. They were sending it to a third party, Nuance Communications. And their privacy policy said that they could do that. And the privacy policy said, we recommend you review the privacy policy of the third party. And Nuance's privacy policy encourages you to read the privacy policy. You very start the conversations. This is a maddening, insane situation that we're in. And they're not privacy policies. They're surveillance policies. These are policies that state how you will be spied on, how you and your family and your friends will be spied on by these companies. That's what they are. but they call them privacy policies. Seat number one's policy, they may share biometric data with marketing companies. Personal information could be given to partners for research and analysis. They can exploit, share, and use for any purpose de-identified data. And the extent to which that information is actually de-identified is apparently quite suspect, but I'm not a techie. So, it's a surveillance economy. The term coined is surveillance capitalism, a new economic order that claims human experience is free raw material for hidden commercial practices. Now this might start sounding a little bit socialist, but I will be showing you some names of people who are very, very concerned about this, and they're certainly not socialists. It rests on a vast extraction infrastructure that is growing by the day. Increasingly offline, and there's a whole range of offline Internet of Things products that they're ready to go, that companies want to start releasing. They're just waiting until we're more accustomed to accepting them. And nothing is off limits to be known. Nothing's off limits. In fact, they have a name for what they don't currently know, and they call it dark data. That's what it's called in the industry. Information that's not currently known. Not only is that dark data a potential source of revenue, and so therefore, capitalism, potential source of revenue, get it, grab it, make some money. If you can corner it, if you can capture it just for yourself, then that's a source of competitive advantage. Harriet Green, who ran IBM, the Watson Internet of Things, for a few years, invested $3 billion during that time, she said this so-called dark data represents a phenomenal opportunity. It's not even about the new technology, it's the conversions of the technology. The ability to use sensors for everything in the world to basically be a computer, whether it's your contact lenses, your hospital bed, or a railway track. And these are the sorts of things I've been reading over the summer, scaring me to death. But these are quite openly said. When you actually read them again, you think, wait a minute, that's messed up, isn't it? Isn't that a bit disturbing? What disturbs me most of all, and the reason why I wanted to do this presentation, is the surveillance of our children. So, you've got connected baby monitors, the Motorola Halo, now owned by Lenovo. You've got Neopets, you nourish digital pets, I don't know. YouTube Kids, so you could argue that YouTube Kids is an attempt by Google to make YouTube safer for children. That's fair enough. But you could also argue it's a great way of, reassuring parents so you can then gain as much data as you possibly can about children, what they're watching, when they're watching it, and so on. Smart toys, my friend Kayla, Barbie's Dream House is that one there. It's a smart house, ironic. Picks up what children say and responds to them. My friend Kayla, that's not my friend Kayla by the way, my friend Kayla, in Germany they banned it. They banned my friend Kayla. And they recommended if you bought one to destroy it. That was the German government said that. I don't think you can buy them anymore, I'm not sure. So I was disappointed. But Germany's interesting because Germany also banned Street View. They stopped Google from creating Street View in their country. I think that's instructive because of all the European powers. You could probably argue that Germany has the most recent and damaging experience with two forms of totalitarianism, on the right and on the left. We've got interactive playgrounds, these are being made. And finally, the granddaddy of them all, social media, which I'll turn to now. So, answer to the question, you probably won't be surprised now given the tone of what I've been saying. The answer to the question is 60%. So 60% of 8 to 11-year-olds have an online profile, which is surprisingly high, considering that social media is not supposed to be used until 13. But what really bothers me is that 13 is probably the worst age for someone to start getting onto social media. It's the worst possible age. 13, 14. Yeah, that's the age when you're allowed to use it. But people are using it anyway. So smartphones amongst the young. So associated with all sorts of problematic issues, from pornography, violent imagery, extremism. The police wrote to parents in this country over the summer, warning them of their child becoming indoctrinated by extremist material. I don't know if you saw that in the news. I think we need to do a bit more than write to parents and warn them about this. So that's just 8, but I'm going to focus on social media addiction in this section. So my key source for this is a collaborative paper by Jonathan Haidt and Dr. Jean Twain, I hope I'm saying her name right, Haidt wrote, amongst other books, The Coddling of the American Mind. Twain wrote iGen. Both work at universities, highly respected academics. The paper is, does social media use contribute to the rise of adolescent mood disorders, depression and anxiety, and related behaviours, especially self-harm and suicide, began around 2012-2013. So as I said at the start, there will be some upsetting facts and stats in this section. So Haidt gave testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and this is emergency room visits for self-harm by children and adolescents. You can see the precipitous rise there in females, adolescents and children visiting the emergency rooms with self-harm. Males also rising, but that's more than double, I think. Huge rise. What could possibly be causing it? Here are a percentage of US teens who had major depression in the last year. Note the years when this is starting. Gen Z, millennials here. Girls, again, more or less doubling in depression to more or less 1 in 4 girls, depression in the US, from approximately 1 in 10. And boys also significantly affected. This is the same stat I just showed you, but I think it's quite interesting because you can see the two other age groups. No change in depressive episodes, but for these two cohorts, a huge, significant increase. Suicide ideation, thinking about suicide, or attempting suicide and therefore being admitted to emergency departments, rise. Happiness, down. So here, from again, in the same period, children's happiness from the Good Childhood Report falling for both genders. Lonely at school, increasing quite markedly from around the same time. Mostly in English-speaking countries, but actually globally too. Jonathan Haidt says, it's a crisis, and it's specific to mood disorders, and they're related to depression and anxiety. It's not the result of changes in young people self-diagnosing or being willing to reveal, and he's got some data on that. The crisis started suddenly in the early 2000s and 10s. The increase in mental illness is very large. The crisis is gendered. I think he wrote somewhere that 14-year-old girls are the most affected of all cohorts. So we've seen a lot of correlation, but what about causality? Well, there are numerous studies that prove the causal relationship between social media and mental health. To give just 3 quick examples, 2013 study here showing how following Facebook exacerbates feelings of envy and lowers life satisfaction. Another study showing how browsing profiles can predict depressive symptoms. 2017 study here, liking content, clicking links, consistently related to compromised well-being. So the evidence is in and it's mounting. On top of this, we know because we work in education and also through all the psychology that's available, we know that young people are far more peer orientated. They suffer more from FOMO, for example, something I used to make fun of. I myself suffer from FOMO, but FOMO can actually be very significant for young people. Not only are they missing out, but having it constantly pushed into their faces that they're not there, they're not at the party, they're not part of the gang. It can really have a significant impact upon them. We know that young people are going through a process of self-discovery, of creating their own identity, yet at the same time feeling drawn to be part of groups, and Sabuff talks about this brilliantly in her book, and how social media is making this process more difficult. We know that young people are subject to large physical and emotional changes. Certainly we know that working in education, and we know that from our own memories of being adolescents ourselves. Young people have a tendency to be more self-conscious, and young people, adolescents, are going through significant structural remodeling and neuronal reconfiguring of the brain. And again, that has to be a factor in all of this. A 2016 statement can also be linked to causality in the sheer fact that young people are on their phones so much more. Michelle Klein, Facebook marketing director, reporting with some glee about how the average millennial is on their phone for 157 times a day. No exit is another factor in this. Now, Sabuff, I love this quote from Sabuff. The condition of no exit creeps on slippered feet. First, we do not even have to look away, and later we cannot. Adults suffer from this far less than young people. Young people have to be on social media. They have to, if they want to have friends and be, you know, have a life, if you like, if you will, then social media is a key part of this. And we talk about this ourselves as educators. We talk about this plenty of times, how in the old days, nothing to glorify the old days, but in the old days, at least when you got home, home was a safe space, a space away from bullying, perhaps, and to give that example, away from that peer pressure. But now, home is not that space because of the smartphone, because of social media. This is also illustrated by an ICMPA Salzburg Academy study. Over 5 continents, 1,000 young people asked to abstain from social media, from digital media for 24 hours. These were the things that they were saying. I panicked. I hope that I never again have such a day in my life. My anxiety took over and I caved in. I began going crazy. I felt like a drug addict. These are actual, real quotes of the young people who took part in that study. They can't exit. And if you can't exit, that can cause quite a lot of psychological harm, according to some studies. So there's a human psychological need to be able to exit, to not be seen, to be moody, irritable, sullen, to just chill and just talk to people in a way in which you won't be judged. And surveillance capitalism is going to eliminate those spaces. There will be no exit. That's the mission. All dark data will be captured. Surveillance will be total. And for many of the young today, that seems to be getting close to the truth anyway. So clearly, we have a massive, massive problem here. Massive problem. And I think we kind of know it. And the data is now out. So what are we going to do? So before I get to section 3, I've already said this to some of the students. It's my contention, my strongly held belief, that these are not age appropriate. And just like gambling, alcohol, we need to limit their use to over 18s. And I haven't even gone into all of this stuff. There's also access via the smartphone. Because the smartphone is the device that allows young people to access all of these things. Now I know there are positives, I know there are arguments against. I haven't got time to go into them, maybe we can do a bit of that in Q&A. But I think time up. Of course you could ask the companies to self-regulate. Let's see what Zuckerberg said. This time giving evidence to Congress after the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Was your data included in the data sold to the malicious third parties?
Yes.
It was. Now, are you willing to change your business model in the interest of protecting individual privacy?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure what that means.
Mark Zuckerberg isn't sure what it means, but I think he does know what it means. And it would run counter to his business model of Facebook. But
would you be comfortable sharing with us the name of the hotel you stayed in last night?
Testimony's worth watching. It's quite hilarious, actually. All right. Meta, Google, Amazon, they're not going to change their business models because they're within a system of surveillance capitalism. And the imperatives will drive them to just carry on behaving in the same way, regardless of little tweaks that they make. That's my central point. So, back to surveillance capitalism, how it works. 2 more imperatives to do. So the first of those is prediction. So this was a question that was up on the board at the start. Facebook's prediction is AI, FB Learner Flow, ingests trillions of data points every day, and the prediction service makes 6 million predictions per second. Here's a great quote from the Amazon Senior Vice President: voice shopping is good for business and good for predicting business. So we move from data extraction and economies of scope, that data from as many sources as possible, to using that data to make predictions. The closer businesses can get to predicting accurately, the more money they can make. Just like when you bet on something, the more knowledge you can get, the better bet you can make, the more chance you have of making money. So we've got insurance. They want to be able to accurately predict the behavior of those they're insuring. Advertising, the best timing for an advert, what type of adverts, and so on. And manufacturing and retail, knowing which products will be sold and in what quantities and at what time. So there's a few examples here This section will be quite brief, I would tell you, but we've got black box telematics insurance. This is mainly targeted at the young because your insurance is so prohibitively expensive at a young age. But it's now being rolled out more to us oldies. So they can alter the premiums in real time, up or down, depending on how you're driving. And it can issue financial penalties, maybe you're speeding, and your cover could be cancelled altogether. Maybe, for example, you drive more miles than you say you're going to do as part of the policy. Now you might be thinking, well, so what? That's fair, isn't it? If someone's driving badly, their premium should change. But it's instructive to note this as part of this system of surveillance and using it to predict. There was a 2016 deal between Dell and General Motors. They created the car industry's first cognitive platform. Microsoft is in American Family Insurance, to home automation. Google France wants to work to blend technology and hardware with insurance. And this is one of those other creepy, frightening quotes that are made as a selling point. This is Microsoft's personal assistant, Cortana. I know so much about you. I can help you in ways you don't quite expect. I can see patterns that you can't see. That's the magic. Right, that's prediction. Imperative 4 is behavior modification. So we move from predicting behavior to modifying people's behavior. Because the best way to predict someone's behavior is to nudge, herd, manipulate, and modify their behavior in a specific direction. Now, behavior modification, the tech giants have already shown they can do it. And these two large experiments are really quite interesting, I think. So Pokemon Go, I don't know if you guys remember Pokemon Go at all, but putting these cartoon characters out into the real world, people run around chasing them and finding them. It's massively popular, especially in America. What came out from this thing is, first of all, Google were pushing and herding people around the country to where they wanted them to go. And that started to raise people's eyebrows as to this behavior modification aspect. Also, restaurants, bars, cafes were paying to have these Pokemons in their establishments so people would visit them. So you've got there quite an interesting change, quite an interesting development. But Zuboff describes it as just a small little antennae rising out of the machine that is Google and letting us see what they're able to do. And what a great way to do it. It's a game, it's fun, it's cartoon characters. They collected a ton of data when they did that as well. Now this Facebook one is quite, it gets out the votes. So they ran experiments quite often. They ran experiments every day. But this was a major experiment they ran, where they, on their newsfeed, some people got no message. Some people got this message, but they didn't get these faces, they didn't get their friends. And some people got, the third group got this with their friends saying they voted. And they demonstrated that people who got this were more likely to vote. And they were saying, isn't this great? We got more people to vote. But again, it raised the issue. If you can get more people to vote, without their knowledge, consent, or understanding that that's what you've just done, what does that say about what your business is and what it can do? So a document was released, it was found. A Facebook document was aimed at Australian and New Zealand advertising companies. And they said they had psychological insights on 6.4 million high school and tertiary students and young Aussies and Kiwis in the workplace. By monitoring posts, pictures, interactions, and activity, Facebook can work out when young people feel stressed, defeated, overwhelmed, anxious, stupid, and so on. And therefore most vulnerable to a certain ad or nudge. I think Friday night at 10 p.m. was one of those times. Look at what you're doing, look at what you're searching for, hit you with that ad, get that behavior that you want. This has massive implications for our societies, and we're feeling these implications, we're feeling these effects, but I'm struggling, we're all struggling to articulate what's going on. But post-1945, there were massive concerns about the power of behavior modification, psychological manipulation, propaganda, understandably so after what had taken place. There was a report, and also the advances that we made in psychology and psychological research. There was a report in 1974 where they rejected behavior modification as a tool for the state in America as being inconsistent with the principles of the Constitution. But behavior modification is now very much here. It's a creature of the market rather than a government, but it is being used in partnership with government. So during the 2016 presidential election, Cambridge Analytica, using Facebook data, used voter disengagement tactics to discourage or demobilize certain types of people from voting, black Americans in particular. They were hitting them with anti-Hillary ads to discourage them from voting, and it worked. This has just been announced recently in the UK. Migrants convicted of criminal offences will need to use smartwatches installed with facial recognition tech to scan their face up to 5 times a day under the new UK government plans. Now again, all of this is contentious, and you might feel, well, they committed a crime, you know, why not do this? They don't have to go to prison, you know, they can be on home release or whatever you want to call it. But who's providing the smartwatches and the facial rec technology? And who's next with all this? Now there is a country that currently has an open prison in the west of that region, where they just monitor everyone using facial rec. And that's the Uyghur population in a prison in China, sorry, a re-education centre in China. Is a car a transportation device, or is it, as the CEO of Ford puts it, a data box? These are all things that we need to be thinking about. Can you name any other industry that calls its consumers users? That's not a rhetorical question.
Drugs.
Yeah. So Professor Shoshana's book says we need to start naming and understanding what's happening, hence her book, and all the work she's been doing for 40 odd years, from Logra, I think. We need to start naming and understanding the problem. What is happening is not normal. I don't mean that in like it's just never happened before. It is unprecedented. And because it's unprecedented, we don't really understand it. We don't have the language to describe it. We need urgent appreciation, what's happened, what's happening, and the long-term vision. And we need to rediscover our sense of shock and anger. Right, I'm going to move from this to give a little case study on Google Glass. And then I'll try and wrap it up, and then I think we'll have some time, but I'll try and wrap it up then. So Google Glass, that's Sergey Brin, one of the co-founders of Google. So here's the story of Google Glass. So it was launched in 2012 with all the gubbins on it, camera, microphone, could show you a visual display. But it was met with all sorts of resistance from privacy advocates and the US general public. Sergey Brin's response is instructive. People always have a natural aversion to innovation. This is often the tech giant response. Oh, we just Luddites. You'll get used to it. It's fine. Someone walking around with a thing, video news. It's not a problem. But it was a problem. They dropped it in 2015. But it resurfaced in 2017 as Google Glass Enterprise Edition, which I'll show you in a sec. But this timeline here follows what Zuboff calls, this is classic tech giant behavior. The first thing they do is they make an incursion. They go into space that previously wasn't being recorded or surveilled. They then attempt to habituate us to this incursion, to normalize it. She uses Street View as her example. She goes into it quite some detail. What's going on there? If it goes wrong, that's supposed to be this bit here. You adapt, and then here is the redirection. Incursion, habituation, adaptation, and redirection. This is the redirection here. So Google Glass is being used by lots of companies. Your supervisor can take over and see what you're seeing to help you with a problem, and can speak to you and hear what you're hearing. Not scary at all. So Book makes the point that this is a great way to habituate people, because at work you can't really complain so much. It's not your choice, you haven't bought it. And also with work, the arguments are used for productivity and efficiency, as they are with Microsoft's version, the HoloLens 2. Optimize your operations and increase employee productivity. I find this deeply worrying, but here we go. This guy. So, this is a new product. I Googled it so many times, I just didn't believe it exists, but it's out now. And it's a collaboration between Ray-Ban and Meta. They've got video cameras in the frame, and they've got microphones in the frame so they can pick up conversation. Know the language. Seamless social sharing. And Zuboff talks a lot about the language that is used by the tech giants. Seamless, I think Zuboff would reframe that to be frictionless. As much as possible, the tech giants want what's happening to be below our conscious awareness and not interfere with our day-to-day lives. So she would probably say frictionless. Social. What could be more antisocial than wearing a pair of dark sunglasses and filming people and listening to them without their consent? And sharing, spying. So frictionless, antisocial, spying. Buy now, $2.99. This should be banned immediately, and they can be banned under current legislation because you're not allowed to have a concealed surveillance device, which I would argue that is. Just expand the definition, you just ban them. But they're not, and you can buy them. I hate these guys. I'm gonna move on because of time, but I could just run on about these for ages. Okay, the road from Shenzhen. So Zuboff uses this because there was a big tech conference in Shenzhen, big city in southern China. It was attended by lots of Western tech companies with all the latest surveillance methods and software and so on. And she essentially says, we've got two roads here, and one's nice and one's not. Now, Google, Eric Schmidt, who was the former CEO of Google, he said this in 2015. Now, this is the vision. This is one vision. The internet will disappear. There'll be so many devices, sensors, wearables, things that you're interacting with, you won't even see it. Now, he's not saying this is some like Nostradamus thing. He runs Google. This is the plan. You won't even know it's there. It will disappear. They've got sensors now. You can weave them into clothing. You can stick them onto things with stickers. You can turn any physical space into a browsable environment. So note that. Essentially, you turn the world into the internet and then you can search it. This is Zuboff's words. With all of these sensors, which can be applied in thousands, millions, or even billions, they can measure everything from a bee buzzing, your smile, a breakfast conversation, to the wind in the trees. The goal is to create a seamless nervous system that covers the entire planet. Now that sounds like science fiction, but she says that is very, very much the direction of travel. She mentions behaviorism quite a lot in her book. And she draws a line from the early behaviourists such as John Watson, to B.F. Skinner, to Google's Hal Varian, to Alex Pentland. This is from Skinner, Beyond Freedom and Dignity. What is being abolished is autonomous man, the inner man, the man defended by the literatures of freedom and dignity. Only by dispossessing him can we turn from the inferred to the observed, from the inaccessible to the manipulable. So this vision, this behaviourist vision, is that concepts such as freedom and justice and so on, they're a pain. And what we need to do is turn everyone and everything into a transparent, searchable, measurable node. So this is basically an unprecedented attack on the very notion of free will. And if that's the case, it's an attack on Western philosophy, religion, culture, and what is meant to be human. These are some people who are concerned. I just sort of put their names up. I'm not saying they're all, the point is, they're all insiders. They've been inside. They've worked at Google, Facebook, and so on. They're high up. And they're really, really concerned. And they're sounding the alarm bells. And nothing, from my perspective, much seems to be happening. But the other road is this. So Zuboff says society has tamed the dangerous excess of raw capitalism before, and now we need to do it again. Just like we stopped children being stuffed up chimneys, and we made factories much safer places so people weren't dying in factories, and we gave people a bit more time. All the things that happened with industrial capitalism need to happen with this new form of capitalism. First of all, we need to understand what's happening. We need new laws. And she's actually quite positive about GDPR and the online safety law, which may come in soon. She's quite positive about these, but only if we apply them in full. So there's loads of stuff in GDPR that actually, if we applied it in full, hugely restrict companies such as Meta. She says we need a new vision for our democracies. So I do remember in the early noughties how the internet was going to be democratizing and it was going to make the world a better place. And don't get me wrong, in many ways it has, but in many, many fundamental, extremely concerning ways, it has definitely not. And I think, this is my personal view, we need some red lines against the internet of everything, against this internet of things. Zuboff says, Every era must strive to strengthen, protect and rejuvenate its claims to the sanctity and sovereignty of the individual person. And I'm afraid to say that this is our time, and this is your challenge, young people and old people alike. We're going to have to get on with this. I come back to this. I come back to this. These things are extraction devices for getting as much data as possible from the young. They don't care how the data is gathered. The key thing is that young people are looking at it, using their phones as much as possible. Now, I just wanted to clarify something, because I did give this a little taster to try and be controversial and get some questions to come. How it would happen is quite simply this. The first cohort would be 11 to 12-year-olds, right? Maybe if we could do that in 2024, I'd love that. And they're the first cohort that would not be allowed to have a smartphone until they're 18. You guys get to keep your phones, don't worry about it. It would probably take, well, 5 years to roll that through. Got to pass the law, enact the law, add another 2, 7 years' time. In 7 years' time, it's done. You'll still keep your phones, and in 7 years' time, you'll be in your 20s. And maybe you'll be thinking a little bit differently about what smartphones are doing to your, I don't know, nieces, nephews, cousins, or maybe even the children that you might have in the future. This is Nokia 150. You can take phone calls and texts, it's got a great MP3 player, it's got a camera, it's got some great games. It doesn't connect to the internet. It's all you need, and it costs 42 quid. If I was a parent, I'm a parent. If I was a parent of a teenager, this is a no-brainer. Okay, big challenges. Let's at least set our children free. Thank you for your time. I don't see any hand.
Yeah. So if you apply that model to democracy and voting, what do you think the implications are for the ability to have a free democracy and free thought in elections? I mean, do you think that an election going forward will never be something where the vote you cast is your vote? Do you think it will always be someone else's?
The question you just asked, first of all, I can't answer it properly and fully, but that's exactly the kind of questions that need to be asked now. Because it's... So Buff says this, one of her measures is this: the data that companies have, that's our data. You know, we're to realise this dream of a human future as well as a digital future. That data needs to be freely accessible by all, so it can be used to improve our societies by governments and NGOs and so on and so forth. So I guess in answer to your question, propaganda and manipulation of voters has existed from time immemorial. But now the sophistication of what they're capable of, these tech giants and so on, is deeply troubling. And so I think some laws around that are going to be needed. And I think the Cambridge Analytica scandal has exposed that massively. So to answer directly, I just think law has to be, something about law. I know they're talking about Facebook banning political advertising, for example. So there might be something there in terms of you just can't advertise, you can't run political ads on social media, something like that. I don't know. But the question you've asked, I think, is fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, to pick up on that point, it doesn't require you to advertise. It simply requires you to be a recipient or a non-requesting recipient of an echo chamber that picks up on certain thoughts and takes you in a direction.
Agree. So
in the second question then is, well, if that is what it requires, how on earth do you regulate it? Because you're in a world where that's happening. Yeah. So how do you stop it?
Well, again, I was just saying it's a great question, and these are the questions of our time. But the phone ban that I'm recommending is for children, not for adults. The smartphone ban that I believe should happen is for below 18. I'm not saying that we as adults shouldn't have smartphones. So I just want to make that point. But the smartphone is the one, isn't it? That's where all the magic happens. That's where they collect all of the data. You know, they know everything. You know, when you look at it, they know when you're near it. They can beep at you and see whether you respond. The smartphone is the extraction device par excellence at the moment. So it's something around that, I think, is where we need to look. Like watching Netflix at home, you know, reading The Guardian online, as I do most evenings. Okay, a little bit liberal, but yes.
I was going to ask if you could think of a successful piece of legislation that's been brought in to protect the privacy and or free will of the individual. So I'll try to wrap my brains.
No,
No.
not really. I do think, though, having read GDPR, when you actually read what it says, so there's a thing about the company should only collect the information that they need for their product. It's stated in there. Should not collect excessive information. But how to prove that? That's the devil in the detail. But that as a principle, which is one of the many in the law, so it could actually be very, very impactful. What you'd need is for that to be enforced. You'd need governments to take on the tech giants. And to go back to Castle Google, it's so powerful. It's so unbelievably strong. And it's not the only one. And got China Tech as well, and so on and so forth. So I'm answering your question.
Yeah,
I think GDPR could maybe.
No, you're right. It seems to me that these things are racing ahead of the law.
Yeah. There's no democracy involved.
I think the issue is, originally when they made the rules in Europe, it was that they weren't allowed to take our data unless we give them permission. But they changed it round and they made it into opt-out. So all the websites, everything you go onto now on your phone will say, do you want to manage the cookies? And they make it so complicated to manage cookies that it sips through everywhere and you can't get rid of it. And the reason for that is the governments themselves are using the data, and data has become a very valuable currency. It's stepped outside of the advertising and communication, and people are dealing in data. And data is the new currency.
That's totally agree with that. And in the governments, there's a passage in the book where the book says how the FBI and the CIA are so jealous of Facebook and other tech giants because they can't do what they do. They have to get all these subpoenas and various. They're like, wow, you're surveilling everybody. So what do they need to do? They need to work with them. So it's a symbiotic relationship. Absolutely. Yes.
Do you think that by banning the smartphones, it could have a worse effect once you are 18 on the effect of mental health and the stats that you brought up earlier?
No, I don't. I think it's a great question, but I don't think it because I could draw so many analogies. But the main one is, if you get addicted to something when you're a child, it's way, way harder to break the addiction when you're older.
But you'll still hear about adult addiction. That doesn't change. You'll hear about that addiction and you'll hear about it when you're younger, and so the intrigue may still happen when you're 18.
Yeah, the intrigue would definitely happen. Okay, I'm going to make the analogy. So it's just like with smoking and alcohol, the intrigue is there. But you wouldn't recommend that you give pints of beer to 12-year-olds, would you? Obviously not. I think there's a comparison to be made there. I also think another comparison you can make is, in 1960, they scientifically proved that smoking caused cancer. In the 1980s, 20 years later, they banned smoking on the underground. It took them 20 years from the scientific proof for the actual law to catch up. So what we've got now is, we've had all this rapid change, we still do. The law is trying to catch up, and it needs to catch up quite rapidly. But I'm deviating a bit from your question, which I guess is, I don't think so. I think 18 plus, you're more able to handle all of it, and as I showed you with all the stats you're just a bit less peer obsessed, but they're still massively problematic, obviously, technologies. Yes, Mr. Nicker.
Well, I have a friend called Fred. He's a Dutchman. We call him Dutch Fred. He's not online at all. He doesn't even have an email address. He rings me with a landline.
Wow.
And he seems perfectly happy. If we want to force changes here regarding these big companies, as opposed to waiting 40 years for a law because it was only really 20 years again that we banned smoking in pubs.
That's right.
Do we not just have to make the sacrifice and vote with our feet? As Dave Chappelle said, get off the bus and not use this stuff until it's right.
I think there's a few problems. One of them is it's hugely addictive. So there's a problem with getting off the bus when something's very addictive. Addictive things are normally regulated, but this stuff is completely unregulated. So that's one of the problems with that viewpoint. I think it's, in principle, it sounds great. The other issues are, this is increasingly necessary. So I hate the idea of facial rec, but very soon, if you hire a car, you're going to open it with your face.
Mm-hmm.
And there won't be a choice. The choices are going to narrow. And it's going to be like, you don't want a car that you open your face? Okay, fine. Use that company 10 miles away. That's twice the price. You know what I'm saying? The options are being narrowed. Then soon it's conceivable that you won't be able to buy a toaster that's not smart. It's conceivable. That's all there'll be. And that'll be not because of consumer choice, but because of what industry wants. Because this is creeping into everything now. Because it generates revenue. If I can make a toaster, that gets me some money. But if I can get some revenue stream from the toaster, that's amazing. So I don't think so. So you want to do your 6 o'clock guarantee, don't you?
I do want to. And Doug's had his hand up a second ago.
I was just going to say back to the banning the phones for the kids. Do you not think by making another thing illegal, it would just cause more problems with the law? Because obviously, children will get their hands on the phone.
Yeah, I'll explain. I can answer that quite quickly and easily, I think, in this way. My argument centres on social media. That's my main point. Although there are all those other things I said. Things like social media, they work off what's called the network effect. If everyone's on social media, you've got to be on social media, right? That's why I would have to buy a phone for my child, even though I don't want to, which is what happens. But if 90% of children aren't on social media, it's dead. You can get a smartphone if you want, who cares? Because you can't communicate with anybody on social media because they're not on social media. So that's the key place I'm coming from there. But yeah, obviously, illegally or whatever, you'll be able to get them. It's just like with drugs.
Yeah.
Some kids can get drugs, but...
I'm doing my walks in a minute.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we'll acknowledge it's told it again in a sec. I have to say, I think that was one of the, I'm going to start saying was better than other ones, but that was one of the very, very good ones, and I will be, that will hugely influence what I think and say for the rest of the week. I'm very glad it was video because that felt important. And just to show that this is now our everyday, the knock-on for this. Tomorrow, our PSHE thing, the 13s, the girls will be in one group talking about, the impacts on their mental health of life online, the pressures they face, the behaviours. I'll be with the boys talking to them about Andrew Tate very urgently and the effect that that's having on boys in the 13s and younger. This stuff there's just ramifications all the time. But look, that was brilliant. It really, really was. I wish there weren't 23 seats because really spread the word about Thompson, not least because I'm taking the next one. But spread the word because really that needed to be heard. It was brilliant. Thank you very, very much. Mr. Holder.
Thank you. I've started a petition. I'm such a busy. I've started a petition banning the smartphones. I'll forward it to anyone who wants it. I'll forward you the link to anyone who wants it.
Okay, he wants to stay and talk to you if you want to stay and talk to him. I'm going to go.